Welcome everyone to Tipsy's Open Learning Series. I'm Vicky Shaw and I'm a Programme Director at the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, and we're joined by two guests today. We have Rob Byrne, who's based at SPRU at the University of Sussex Business School. Rob's part of the core team for the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium and does a lot of work, particularly in Africa. We're also joined by Manuel Laranja, who's from ISEG, the School of Economics and Management at the University of Lisbon. Manuel has a policy background. He was previously director of the National Innovation Agency in Portugal. He's worked at the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Economy and Regional Coordination Commissions. And he's also a member of Tipsy's network of coaches. So we've been working closely with him over the last year or so on tools for the TIP Resource Lab. And that's why we're here today. We're going to be looking at one particular tool, the pentagonal map for system analysis. I think Annie will be sharing the link with you in the chat, and how this tool is informed by transitions principles, which Rob will be talking about, and how this tool's been used in practice in the classroom with students looking at sustainability finance. So it should be a really interesting session. The way we're going to run is that we will start off with some introduction from Rob around the core principles that inform that tool. And then we'll be asking you to engage in some questions around systemic perspectives on sustainability finance. And then Manuel will be sharing the experience of using that tool in practice and making some reflections on that. And we really hope to hear from you as well. So these events are community-led. They are intended to support networking as well across practitioners. So we really want to hear from you if you'd like to share your reflections as we go along in the chat, any questions, or anything else that you'd like to comment on. So nice to see everyone today. And there's a lot to fit in an hour. So I'm going to hand over right now to Rob to kick us off. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to give you what I'm going to call a transitions theory briefing, which I'm going to try and cover system dimensions, actors, materials and rules, and the notion of the regime. And the way I want to do this is through 5 steps. So first of all, to think empirically about what makes for a successful technology. And then from that, sort of move into the idea of system stability, which then brings us to the concept of the regime, followed by a review of what might be the sources of instability in what we call incumbent systems or regimes. And then hopefully all of that leads up to making some sense of the system mapping and analysis tool, the pentagonal map. And then I want to finish by sort of locating that pentagonal map or the regime within what we call the multi-level perspective. So hopefully I can keep to time, just 10 minutes. But to start off with thinking empirically about what makes a technology successful, there's a lot of different elements at work. Obviously the core technology itself and the components that make up the technology and the other parts of the infrastructure, if you like, all need to be able to work together successfully. But you also need things like skilled workforce. If we're talking about something like this, offshore wind generators, then we're talking about a whole set of not just technologies to connect the wind farm to shore and then to a grid, but also to manage the grid, especially when you think about the intermittency of the electricity coming from a wind farm. But all of this needs to be profitable. That means you need to have some kind of demand for the electricity. So we're talking about markets. We're also talking about the way people use electricity, so electricity practices. Many of these things have some kind of cultural meaning. You know, if you think about the practices in your everyday life, they're often associated with some kind of cultural meaning. If we're talking about renewables, wind generators, then there's a certain amount what we might call values, environmentally friendly, for example. But we also need conducive policies. We need political support. There's a whole lot of scientific knowledge underpinning the development of the technologies and the evolution of that, and needs research and development, and so on and so on. So this is a kind of snapshot of some of the elements that are necessary and must be in place and work together to produce what we would consider kind of successful technology or system. And there are many others as well. I'm sure we could go through, spend the rest of the day talking about all of these things. It becomes a very long list, and trying to keep that organized and make sense of it is sort of difficult. But one way to do that, of course, is to kind of categorize. And one possible set of categories, or what we might call system dimensions, would be these kind of science, technology, and infrastructure. But there is policy and governance, politics kinds of elements to the system. Obviously, if you're talking about setting up wind farms and all the rest, you need investment and finance. Then if you think about the practices, cultural meaning, and so on, we've got society and cultural dimensions, and of course markets. And of course, throughout all of this, there are actors making decisions, actors developing technologies, actors operating them, monitoring them. We all actors in the system using the technologies and so on and so on. But if you keep those 5 categories in mind, and we'll come back to them in the slide after this one, which is about the sources of the stability in the incumbent system. So the systems that we have in place throughout society, in every country around the world. Certainly if there is a reasonably dominant system anywhere for any particular thing, whether it's electricity production and consumption, or whether it's for health services, or whether it's the food system, whatever it is, where these are stable, there are sources of stability, and there are many, at least in terms of the theory that we're talking about, transitions theory. So examples here would be capabilities, skills and knowledge of the workforce, but also the skills and knowledge as users, the way we use products and technologies. Economic structures, vested interests, of course, make for very stable systems, because very often vested interests are very powerful. They don't want to see systems change. There's the source of revenue, but also the source of political influence, and so on. So vested interests are very important. And in terms of technologies, we have compatible infrastructure. So we think about, for example, coal-fired power stations or nuclear power stations, these big centralized electricity generators, and the grid connections, and the way the sort of components of the grid are set up, all compatible with centralized big power stations. And likewise, the institutions, policies, and so on, and rules, and I'll come back to rules especially, have evolved with those systems and are themselves very difficult to change. Some of them very deeply seated, particularly when we talk about certain kinds of rules. And things like technological and user cultures, very difficult to change, very slow. And all of these things are sources of stability. They all work together, and they co-evolve together. They reinforce one another. So it makes systems very, very stable. What we tend to find is that if there are changes in one of the processes, that they're often, in effect, at least, resisted by the others. So, for example, if you want to introduce more cycling into city urban mobility, and you try to do that by making it difficult to use a car, then there is usually very immediately strong resistance, particularly from car users who don't want to continue using their car. So it gets very difficult to change that kind of mobility culture. If we bring all of this together, we can sort of represent it in what we call the regime concept. So I put the 5 dimensions there, and they're sort of locked together with these solid lines into this pentagon, and that sort of indicates that stability. And if we think about the way each of these dimensions reproduce and evolve over time, we sort of represent that by the lines showing change over time, or reproduction over time, as being solid straight lines. They're all aligned with each other, and this goes on and on. So we have a very, very strong system. That's the system we call the regime. And what holds all of that system together is that coevolution, a set of path dependencies, and especially key to the regime concept, shared rules. All of this leads to lock-in, and we'll come back to rules in a little bit. While all of that is very stable, it's also fair to say that even these incumbent systems have sources of instability. So things like climate change, environmental change, climate change, very topical one at the moment as COP28 gets underway today, and puts pressure on the regime, the incumbent system. Something needs to be done about it. So the fossil fuel-based energy system needs to respond in some way. If it is to survive, it needs to be able to respond to climate change in some plausible and useful way. And that change is mediated through things like social pressure to, onto actors in the regime. So we think about protests for more climate change action, and actually in recent times linked with demographic changes, where we've got sort of much more mobilized youth campaigns against climate inaction, and so on, and many other things as well. Development ideologies. We think about the challenge to have the sort of dominant economic model worldwide following the financial crisis, 2008. The development ideology underpinning that then is kind of shaken, and many other things, internal dynamics to the regimes and contradictions, and also sudden kinds of events, disasters. We think about the impacts things like COVID-19 has had on our systems around the world. Think about the war in Ukraine and the impact on energy systems and their stabilities. These instabilities then provide opportunities for alternatives, and it's through sort of recognizing this that we can think about ways of using policies and programs to deliberately, as it were, destabilize or disrupt these incumbent systems. And that's what kind of leads us into the theory of change that lies at the heart of transformative innovation policy. But in order to be able to do all of this, we need to understand the system, understand the sources of stability and instability. And this is where the pentagonal map sort of begins the process, at least, where we see those 5 dimensions reflected, but also that within each of these there are actors, materials, and rules. So the actors, in principle, that's all of us, individuals, whether we're powerful, powerless, organizational actors. Again, it's a long list potentially. So these are often grouped: policymakers, professionals, activists, and so on. And there are all kinds of materials, fixed, infrastructure, roads, etc., or flowing materials such as money. They're sometimes visible, sometimes invisible. So, the wind farm, or invisible materials such as knowledge, and rules. And I said I'd come back to rules, which we see in the theory 3 kinds. There's sort of regulative rules, which would be things like laws and technical standards, very codified, very explicit, but also less explicit and often less codified, things like normative rules, so the kinds of assumptions we make, the customs that we follow, and cognitive rules, the kind of shared beliefs that we have, shared perspectives we have on the world, and these kinds of things. And once again, all of these things are related to each other, interact with each other across all of the dimensions of this of the regime, or in looking at this, the pentagonal map. And that is, I think, going to be the focus then that Manuel will take. But then just to locate that finally in what we call the multi-level perspective. So we have the idea of the regime, that dominant way of doing things in any society, whereas with all its materials and actors and so on, and the fact that the actors have these shared rules or rule sets. So that's kind of sitting there in the middle. But then in the multi-level perspective, we will also think about a landscape, which is a, roughly speaking, kind of contextual dimension, where there's all sorts of factors at work, generally things that change slowly, or certainly things that we can't influence very easily. But also, as I say, major events and disasters take place in the landscape. And the landscape can bring pressure to bear on the regime, and making use of that pressure, and in some ways mediating that pressure through other actions, but making use of that pressure, we can make use of experimental spaces, what we call socio-technical niches, where we try different technologies, different practices, and new rules, and develop those as a way to challenge the regime, and hopefully in time influence it strongly enough, or even replace it entirely. So that was a kind of whistle-stop tour, a bit more than 10 minutes. Sorry about that. There's a couple of references there I used in the presentation, but that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. That's a great introduction to what's underpinning the map. And then over to Manuel.
Yes. Hello to everyone. And thank you for this presentation, Rob. It was quite enlightening about what is the socio-technical regime change. But the session today it's about the finance sector. So we need, before we go into the way we use the maps, maybe we should try and see the way that people here have an idea of what the finance sector is, or at least how it works in financing sustainability. So we prepared just a few questions to test your perception of how the system works. So maybe we can run through it. It's on Mentimeter. So you have here on front of you, you can either use the QR code or just enter the code directly to answer the questions. The first question will be, which one is the first question? I think the first question will be something about, what do you think it's the role of finance tackling systemic sustainability challenges? It's an open question, so you can just put some of your views about what do you think it's the role of finance for sustainability. Of course, we see sustainability as being a systemic change. Let's see, and wait a little bit to see what's come up of your responses on this.
But we've got one comment there, Manuel. I mean, did you have anything to say about the role of finance in enabling niche formation?
Yes, finance, it's actually would have a big role. It's possibly one of the major pillars for changing the way socio-technical systems work, not just the energy work that Rob was talking about, but any kind of other socio-technical system. But yes, I think as the answers here show, it has possibly a role on niche formation, but it doesn't end there. Often it's also about the diffusion, and also about scaling the system, spreading the most impactful innovations, etc., etc. But I know it's interesting the way you are answering this question. To encourage regime destabilization, this is actually quite good, because it's not enough to have niche innovation. You have to dismount or dismantle the existing systems sometimes, although sometimes you don't need that much money to do that. What you do that is by using regulation policy, or to actually redraw incentives to the existing system. Interesting. Leverage niche innovation comes a lot. Yes, helping to protect and scale. Exactly. Right. Right. That's interesting.
And do you have anything to say about the role of finance in terms of directionality? Got a comment here: providing incentives for change, steering in desirable directions.
Well, I think not in defining the directionality, the directions for in terms of a socio-technical system change. Often what I see is that the direction is given or defined at the landscape level, but of course the finance that is channeled to this change will have to have some kind of fit with the directionality which is defined. Otherwise, I could end up funding things that go all over the place instead of going in the same direction. But not in the sense that finance helps to define what the directionality is. It helps to actually to get it right, to get all projects in the same direction. Now, the second question is about, could you rate some challenges to a more radical and comprehensive funding for sustainability? This is because sometimes what I see in the finance sector is that they do fund sustainability. Yes, it's undeniable now that they are doing that, but they are not getting as much change as we would expect. So, what do you think this is happening? I mean, that's what is it behind this lack of more radical or more disruptive solutions for sustainability? And you can just rate the different possibilities of answers in this radar that is here. Okay, oh, interesting.
Through, do take a little while.
Short-term perspectives, yes, definitely. That's one of the problems that I may come back to that. Difficulty in combining public and private investor. Yeah, yes. Sometimes we also discuss this issue of blending philanthropic investment with public and private and all of this. It comes also a lot. Also, I think you see narrow benefit and risk evaluation. Yes, I could feel the whole afternoon talking about how this is a big problem. The way that people working in the finance sector, the way they evaluate risk has a lot to say and explains a lot why is that financing is not actually delivering the results that we would like to deliver. Nice. Could we go to a third and final question? What do you think it's urgently needed to transform the sector? So again, we're asking you to just write something, an open question, so that we can perhaps pick up on this at the end of the session to see exactly what kind of expectations you have on how could we speed up this transformation of the finance sector, which for us here, the perspective is it is a fundamental sector that supports transformation of others, but in fact, without transforming itself, it cannot help the other sectors as well. So it's a kind of a double importance of the. It's urgently need transformative perspective. Yes, could not agree more. Manufacturing sector, yes, it could direct the investment to the manufacturing sector. I think this is what you mean. Greater flexibility, too much locked in. Yes, exactly. Resources in exchanges to flow. Upscaling, yes. Again, digitalization of the existing system. Patient capital, yes, exactly. It takes time. This is another thing that we can come back later on. Recognition that global North colonial powers who have destroyed our planet pay more to share. Yeah. That's another angle to this. I mean, some have to degrow so that others can grow. I could not agree more with that as well. And political will, yes. I think we have some of that, but maybe not enough of that. Okay, thank you, Vicky. I think it was a good exercise. So maybe now I can start sharing my my screen and attempt also to share with you what I think is the things that we are learning in our use of the pentagonal map. So welcome again from Lisbon to you all. The things I have here to share with you are related to a small exercise that we do on a short course. It's a sustainability finance course. You know, business schools, they have all these sort of finance courses for everything. And in this particular course, we have a module on innovation for sustainability, which I run in every edition of the course. And previous editions of the course told me that often participants in the course, which come from different sectors, not just the finance sector, but sometimes other sectors that are expecting to learn how to use finance for their own sustainability projects, but they had some kind of a limited view of what the sector is. So I started to wonder, why not use some kind of system thinking approach? And I found this pentagonal map, one of Tipsy tools, and see, well, let's try and use the pentagonal map for these in-class exercises. It's rather limited, so I must say it's just 2 hours. So in-class exercises, you don't go too far with this, but it's worthwhile trying. So I will run through these topics to show you exactly how we do it and how we do what we do and how we do it. The first thing we do, it takes longer. This is just this slide, but I use this slide again and again just to motivate people to try to see transformative change as a need. That's something that it's not happening now. So I try to position existing innovations in this old matrix of Abernathy and Clark on the 1980s, a very old thing. But just to tell them that, yes, we have innovations in the finance sector for sustainability, but in most cases, we can position these innovations as having low impact. For example, they are either technology fixes, so things like investments in technology for renewable energy, or these new technologies that can capture carbon emissions, or carbon pricing markets. Trading schemes are actually coming back again quite strongly here in the Iberian market for Portugal and Spain. Or, for example, incremental innovations, that things, for example, we see in banks. Banks are already excluding investment in what they call harmful industries. So they are trying to greening their portfolio investments. But that's just incremental. That's not really changing the whole portfolio of investments. It's just trying to exclude some of the investments. Or when we see that banks or funds, they sponsor social foundations or social organizations or ONGs, it's again a sort of a greening kind of approach to their sustainability activities. And we call that social innovation. And, you know, strange enough, social innovation is supposed to have higher impact that it's actually having now, at least when it comes to this kind of funding. So we start by saying that this is what's happening, and we see that this is lacking something. That there's a gap here that we call a need for a transformative innovation approach. So having said that, we go straight forward to this pentagonal map that Rob has just presented to you. So thanks, Rob. I don't have to repeat how the 5 dimensions and the 3 layers, but I do repeat in the class during the course. So we do some kind of a rapid, small briefing of what the map is. So what is the expected role of the actors in the system, the materials and the rules, so the 3 layers, and how could they use the post-its to fill these kind of actors and materials, and also rules and institutional frameworks. And after that, we ask the participants, which I didn't say, but they are divided in groups. They work in groups to fill the map. Each group has a map. And after identifying the actors, the materials and the rules, they are then asked to reflect about whether or not they can see some misalignments or malfunctions between the actors, materials, and rules. And then if these alignments that they see are somehow preventing systems change or preventing the finance system to adopt other principles and practices that could lead to a more radical and ambitious funding for sustainability. And then we also ask if they can identify challenges. What do they see as being the greatest challenge for their sector? Not just increase of funding, which is the obvious answer that often they say, well, the biggest challenge is increased funding. It's not just that, but how the funding could be delivered in a different way in order to cause a higher impact. And also ideas. So if you identify what the problems are, could they share also some ideas? So we start doing that. I share some pictures of the working classroom, some of the works they do and they deliver. I'm passing rapidly now so that we can go directly to what I think it's the main discussion here today, which is by using this in the classroom environment, what is actually what we can learn about systems change? Or, I mean, to be more precise, this is not just a systems thinking exercise or systems change exercise. It's a regime for social technical systems transition exercise, which is a bit more difficult in my opinion. So one of the key lessons that I take from this is that, as you probably understood by listening to Rob just earlier, we would need more time to fully understand how the social technical system, what it is and how it works, and how that maps with a pentagonal map. So understanding the 5 dimensions and the 3 layers takes time. And in the classroom, we don't have the whole day. So it's kind of rushing through the topics to see if they get some minor understanding of what it is. But that could be easily solved if we get more time. Now, what I think it's more important is that in these systems thinking exercises or regime changes exercises, we are always assuming that all the essential information to fill the pentagonal map is present in the people in the room. And that's not true. So we need to use the famous lean startup code to get out of the building kind of paradigm. We cannot use just the knowledge that we have in the classroom, but the knowledge that we have outside the classroom. So one interesting thing is that maybe we can complement the exercise that we're doing, and we should. I am already trying to do that, and to be honest, not in this course, but in other courses, we try to complement this, not just with the knowledge that the people that are the participants of that course, but asking them to go to the outside and do interviews with the stakeholders. In this case, interviews with the actors that they identified in the pentagonal map, so that they can match their own assumptions with the things that the actors tell them that the real problems are. And also, I feel that one of the lessons is also we need sometimes to get into more detail of what the problem challenges are. Of course, they identify misalignments and malfunctions in the systems because actors and rules and materials are not perfectly working. But sometimes a simple exercise like using the 5 whys, the problems behind the problems, or a problem mapping kind of exercise, it's helpful because it brings you more detail into what really the problems are. So lessons related to the process and the tools are these ones, and now lessons related to what are actually the outcomes of the exercise. So I summarized based on the participants, on the students' exercises. I invested some time and see how could I put it all together. So it's actually my map. It's not their map. It's a summary of all maps that we did in the classroom to see whether some major conclusions can be taken out of these exercise. It was actually good for me as well. I'm always learning about the finance system and how the finance system works and what are the gaps. So let me share with you what I think are the major lessons related to outcomes. So in most cases, their perceived challenge are the ones you see on your left. You know, things like lack of long-term vision. They claim that they need more education for finance, for sustainability, resistance to change. They don't see governance as being aligned, so see governance also as a problem. They do talk a lot about cybersecurity and data security or availability of data, scarcity of data to analyze their own sector. But overall, my view on this is that, yes, they seem to be gaining a vision of their own system as a whole, which was actually the initial objective of using the pentagonal map and the system thinking. They seem to be also identifying some problems and acknowledging that the current regime needs to change. So this is already some progress with the people that come from the finance sector. It's because if you don't do that, they continue to think about innovation as being product or services, new products or services. They don't jump to the systems level. So it's already something interesting. But in terms of ideas, that's where I think the exercise is a little bit poor. So they come up with things like improve sustainability, finance literacy, or the need to develop risk models, provide tax incentives, even launch new products. They are fascinated by artificial intelligence and digital data and things like that. And my interpretation of that is that they seem to be still addicted to incrementalism and to small incremental solutions. So the point where we started, so that we started by saying that we needed to go to systems thinking because we think the finance sector is already funding sustainability, but they're not funding in a way that really causes higher impact. By doing this exercise, actually, we end up in a similar point. So we need to actually do more. So I think these proposed ideas of continuing with the ESG kind of regulation compliance schemes, it's okay. Nobody has anything against this, but in my view, that's not sufficient. And I'm not trying to be cynical on this, but I think the finance sector is possibly in such a very comfortable position that they don't see a need to change. They are being forced to do some changes because of regulation, because of ESG and the new European regulations that are now coming out. But if it wasn't for that, maybe they wouldn't do anything at all new. Now, coming to final reflections, and I'm keeping my eyes on the time so that we can have also some time to questions and answers. What I would propose for us to reflect a little bit, and it's that using systems thinking, using the pentagonal map, it's very interesting. It enables participants to capture a systems thinking view of what's happening, and they really acquire a different angle to see problems. But they still have difficulties unblocking or unlocking their deeper mental models. So it's like, again, the iceberg kind of problem. They see the need to changes in behavior and the way things work, but the deeper things related to mindset changes or the conscious need to see their own role and the role of others in the system, I think it's still missing here. And finally, I would leave you with this quote which came to my mind when I was preparing this presentation, which is, yes, there's still a lot in the finance sector about this addiction to increasing efficiency, optimization, incremental change, single technology, single projects, but not a portfolio with a directionality on top of it. They seem to be locked in looking at the system as being a complicated system that can be broken up in parts but still there has some effort to be done in trying to explain that this is a complex problem, not a complicated problem. So it's that kind of systems approach where change is made by looking at the emergent properties of the system as we go along. So, you know, many years ago, I read this book of Geoff Morgan. You probably heard about that. The locusts in the Byrne have this lovely sentence about fixing the boat and putting the boat again in turbulent waters and expecting the boat to float again. So, but the waters are becoming increasingly turbulent. In my view, you know, the world is being more complex now, a lot of interrelated crises. So I don't think the solution can be just fixing the boat with incremental solutions and then putting the boat again floating and going into the rough sea. So thank you so much. This is what I had to share with you. And I think we have some time for questions and answers. Over to you, Vicky.
Thank you. And it's so interesting to see how this has been interpreted through the eyes of that context and those students. I can see in the chat that there's a question from Eva. And Eva, would you be happy to introduce yourself and share your question?
Hello to everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Eva Valencia, and I'm working as Scaling Coordinator in the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, and I'm also a co-founder of Tricolor Coalition, which is the donor economics coalition in Mexico City. So thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I've been thinking about these challenges of finance for sustainability transitions a lot, as I've seen them also. And I think one of my questions was about risk, because I think that's what I've seen as well, that even though there seems to be certain investments and funding for sustainability transitions, in the end, if it comes to much risk, if it comes to radical, no one wants to invest in it. So I don't know if you have had any thoughts on this, about how to try to assure that to decrease certain risk in order for more investments to come in, and also, or why, or who can start to do these safety nets for financial risk so that others can be the critical mass that follow. Thank you.
Should we take more than one question, or should we address these?
Yeah, should we get Len perhaps to voice his question as well, and then you could have a little cluster.
Thanks, Vicky. Hi, Manuel. Hi, everybody. My name is Len Kelleher. I'm with the University of Cambridge, and I'm one of the Tipsy network of coaches as well. My question is for Manuel. Manuel, your comment about motivations within the sector was really interesting. It's not a sector that I'm familiar with, so it's a very simplistic question, but hopefully you can shed some light on it. You mentioned that change seemed to be driven by regulation more than anything else at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that the sector seems to be kind of forced into thinking about change rather than necessarily thinking it for different reasons. I'm just wondering, does the idea of, say, sustainability providing competitive advantage opportunities, is that a widespread view at this stage, or is it still not that widespread? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's try and address the questions. First, the question about risk from Eva. It's interesting because my notion is they're still very traditional in the way they assess risks. And I'm careful when saying that, because coming from a business school, I think it's our fault in business schools to always teach these finance students as having the same risk assessment methodologies are based on what happened in the past, not risk looking forward to what's going to happen in the future. So risk assessments are based on the data that were collected from the experience of these funds and these banks and in previous investments. And I think what we need to explain to them is this is not enough for the challenges that we face now. the way that we are looking at the socio-technical systems change is trying to see the risks of the change of the socio-technical systems going wrong or going in the wrong direction. So it's risks towards the future, or the unrealized future, or the not so linear realization of the future as we think, and not so much about the going into the past and extrapolating the past to the future. That's kind of a difficult conversation, because they're so addicted to this kind of thinking and calculating returns and calculating risks always on the same way, that it gets difficult to change. Again, it's the change of minds and change of mentality. And the question about if competitiveness can also come from these new investments on sustainability, that's a tricky one, because as far as I can see, they have to come to a different notion about what value creation is. So if they keep being locked in this idea that economic and financial value, it's the driver for the competitiveness of the sector, then I think we will have some problems, because they are ignoring the value that other sectors are taking out from nature. They are ignoring the social value creation. So, and again, I think education and business schools, which actually were pointed in their exercises, they acknowledge that business schools are part of the problem, which is nice for me, having a class where my students say that we are the problem. But and we acknowledge, yes, we know we are. We have to change also the way we teach you these concepts. But it's challenging. We would need this shift between explaining a narrow vision with value creation for a much broader vision of what value creation is. Not sure I truly answer your question.
Thank you. Oh, they're coming thick and fast now, so maybe thanks for answering those, and thank you very much for the people posing those. We have a question from Farron in the chat, and he's asked me to share it with you. And I can maybe break it into a couple of parts, because it's related to the pentagonal map, so the actual practical use of the tool. So the first question was, how do you avoid falling into an us and them dialectic in terms of niches and regimes when you're thinking about using this map? And I mean, this might be something that Rob might want to comment on as well. So would either of you like to come in on that question?
Maybe Rob wants to go first. I don't know.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll probably fall into that trap myself, but I get the part, thinking back to the actors in the regime. You know, I think first thing I said in the pentagonal map slide was, in principle, the actors are all of us, that we all participate in regime, so we can't quite escape some of the blame. And I suppose one of the things is perhaps we can reflect on our own practices, the extent to which we ourselves, you know, participate in reproducing the regime, so that it's not us and them. And then, you know, that can help us think about, you know, what maybe some of the things that we can change at an individual level. That's a part of it, perhaps. That doesn't necessarily work for, you know, thinking about how organizations change and the rule changes necessary for you know, getting a new regime, etc. But yeah, recognizing we're all kind of implicated somehow or other, I suppose, is one way to at least yeah, slightly ease this us and them.
Thanks, Rob. That's a really important point, that we're all part of the system that we're looking to change in some way. The other question that Farron had was about and I know this, Manuel might want to respond to this, because I know this problem has come up for you, in that, have you got any ideas for how you can support the literacy on the system dimension so that people can use this map more easily?
Yes. Well, as I said during the presentation, I think there's two issues there. One is lack of time, because when you have these short courses is the only way that we have success here in Lisbon, calling people from industry back to university. It's by making these short courses. They cannot be very long master degrees or things like that. So we are always struggling about time. And so my guess is that I would, in order to give them more time, is to maybe change a little bit the way the courses are done, using some kind of a blending approach where you can have some videos previously recorded explaining what the pentagonal map is and the dimensions, so that we don't need so much time doing the briefing and explaining exactly what the socio-technical system is, the dimensions that we want to consider. But to be honest, we haven't done it yet. We're just thinking, and how could we, but we need to keep the courses short. That's for sure. Otherwise, we don't get anyone in the classroom.
Thank you, Manuel. Is there anything that you'd like to add on that, Rob, before I move on to the next question?
Maybe, I suppose I have also tried to get people to think about niches and, in the classroom and what they would need to do to promote a niche. But it is very difficult to do in a short space of time. And, in the context of teaching a course or moduling a course, it's, you get at least you can design an exercise that can run over several weeks, even if people are only actually together for an hour or two to do it. And that maybe helps. But I suppose one thing to recognize, I think, particularly with this kind of theory is there's a lot going on, so there's a lot to understand. And so it's a case of starting the process and getting people to start to think about this, and then allow them, or they need time then to kind of absorb it, internalize, reflect on what's going on around them, and that it will take time to sort of turn into something that they can use in practice fully, I guess. But that, so you won't see the change in in a 2-hour session, but there definitely won't be a change if you don't start somewhere. So it's a little bit like kind of recognizing the limits of what's possible in a teaching kind of setting. But yeah, eventually I think some people take it up and go deeper, and it will have an influence.
Yeah, I could complement that by saying that the way I see them when they start talking about ideas to solve the problems is that, first of all, they rarely see them as being experiments or niches. They tend to see them as already the greatest solutions, because it's their solution, so it should work. So there's a bit of a work that sometimes we do in the classroom, is that no, maybe you should try, you prototype first. Maybe you should try not to scale the solution already. This is just experimental things. And another thing is that it hasn't come up these analogies with new finance institutions that are already experimenting with some of these problems. So either these people are completely, blinded to these smaller initiatives that are already on the field, or they just don't want to talk about it in a classroom. I don't know, but it's definitely something we should explore, or we should try to promote these new initiatives that are already running, at least in Europe. There's some interesting approaches there, so that they get to be known.
Thank you. It's fascinating to learn about this, using this in this context. I think we've got time for one more question, and there's an interesting question from Masatora Oba. I don't know if it's possible for you to introduce yourself and pose your question for the final question before we finish. If not, I can read it out.
Hi. Hi, my name is Masatora. I'm from Sussex University. My final question is, how should final sector keep a balance between short profit and radical mental problem for transforming to sustainability. Like, like, yeah, of course, like the like the sustainability much important, but like some financial sector like focus on the short profit to be like the financial sustainability, like how to keep between them.
Thank you very much, Masatori. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think we caught that. Are you able to answer that, Manuel? Or...
Yeah, I think I got it. Well, it's a very interesting and difficult question. As far as I could see, people coming from the banking and from the funds, manager of financial funds, they do have a big challenge, because although they want to start investing in sustainability, they still have the older investment portfolios to take care of. And the older portfolios are the dirty ones, in the sense that they were investments coming from previous decades where sustainability was not in the agenda, or was not so strong in the agenda. And so now they have this balance that you're saying is a balance between short profit and the more radical kind of approach. Yes, this is exactly what I think they are feeling now. They cannot just get rid of the old investment because they didn't recover, the return is not sufficient so that they can just dispose from these investments. So they have to keep in their portfolio. But at the same time, they have to start trying with smaller or with radical new approaches to investment. And now, in my experience in this short course, is that they're not really there yet. They say they're not even trying these new investments more, at least at the more radical approach, as I would expect them to be. But it's just my reading. I admit I can be wrong.
Provocative way to finish.
Yes.
But that takes us to the end of the session. So I'd just really like to thank you, Manuel, for joining us and sharing this experience of trying the tool, and to thank Rob as well for sharing some of the theory that's behind it, and thank everyone else for attending. It's been really interesting questions and good to hear some of those reflections. Before we finish, I just wanted to share, we have the final one of these events, which is running at the end of next week, and we've just confirmed the listing for that. So I think Annie will be able to share that in case anyone wants to register. This is quite a different type of event. It's going to take place very early in the morning in Portugal and the UK, because we'd really want the opportunity to be able to connect with some of the people that we're working with in South Asia and the Asia Pacific region. So it will be at 8 o'clock in the morning in Portugal and in the UK. Now, Annie's just sharing the link in the chat, and we'll be learning about transformative outcomes, which are familiar to many people, but this will be viewed through the lens of initiatives and experimentation that's happening in the Global South. Again, we have one of our network of coaches joining us for that. That's Ioana, and hope to see you there next week. But thanks everyone for joining.